In William S. Burroughs' 1953 book, or in other words, the drug addict's Bible, Junkie, of whom's title pretty much says all you need to know about the book and the author, there's an interesting excerpt in which he mentions how there's a noticeable unconscious bond between two addicts or former addicts that can be communicated in ways that don't even have to necessarily be verbal or direct, and comes in the form of someone's vibe or aura. You could be walking down the street, look at someone, and just know they're a user. There doesn't even have to necessarily be obvious clues, you just somehow know. It's one of my favorite books of all time, not only because how great of a writer Burroughs was, but because it really resonates with a lot of people who understand what it's like to live in the body of someone who has an unquenchable thirst for all substances recreational. He ends the book by saying that junk use is not an addiction, it's a way of life. And by God was he right. And in this video, I'm going to go into the top 10 worst parts of being a drug addict, and somehow try to figure out how I can possibly relay this video without breaking YouTube's drug glorification rule. If anything, I don't know, maybe this video is entertainment or edutainment? If anything, it's a warning, but also an attempt to adhere to the previous statement I made about Burroughs' claim that drug users around the world all somehow know and understand each other. So let's get into it. This video will be called the top 5 worst things about being an addict. Number 5. Great highs followed by great lows. So the first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. But the first step of NA is to admit that you're powerless and that your life has become unmanageable. But I feel like this step is often either misunderstood or blown out of proportion as to what it even really means. Your average Joe Normie who only takes Tylenol and opted to go ahead and not put themselves through years of hell probably most likely hears this and assumes that it means your drug use caught up to you so intensely that you ended up homeless, in prison, or that your addiction is so bad that you're an embarrassment to your family because you showed up on Thanksgiving after taking 6 Xanax bars, which I didn't even mean to do, and I'm still getting shit for it. But for a lot of people, actually probably most people, never get to the point where their addiction gets that severe. In fact, that stuff actually sounds somehow adventurous compared to my boring life. But what people often don't tell you is that trying to juggle a life where you have to hold down school or a job and a perpetual state of feeling like you're on a highs and lows carousel is really freaking hard to do. In fact, it's almost undoable. I used to binge on pills for upwards to 4 days at a time, and on those days, whether I was at work or school or in any social situation, I'd convinced myself I was, in that moment, in a state of being the best version of myself. I'd be super happy, empathetic, and in general super enjoyable to be around. There's almost no downsides to this window of time for any given drug addict. There is a downside. The downside is you run out of drugs and you have to face everyone as the worst version of yourself, who hasn't slept and is grumpy, and wakes up with a pit of despair in their gut, knowing that the past 4 days is now a fastly fading, distant glowing memory, and you realize that your own stupidity now carries major consequences. I think it's the law of gravity. What goes up must come down. This is really no way to live a life, and if you are managing it somehow, you're most likely managing it as if the ground beneath your feet is in a constant state of being quicksand. I remember I'd go into work after a binge and I'd see some guy whistling, just whistling for no reason, and I'd reflect on myself in great pity and despair. This way of living is not fun at all, and not only are the drugs themselves most likely harming your mind, body, and spirit, but that constant state of highs and lows, birth and rebirth, is an extremely fickle way to approach life, and the stress alone probably ages you more than the drugs do themselves. Your life doesn't stop when you run out of drugs. and on Monday morning, you might have to accept that you're due at work in 45 minutes, and you're cold, you didn't sleep, and the way your uniform is touching against your skin makes you want to just quit your job, but you can't, so you don't. Number 4, the first thing you learn is that you always gotta wait. On surface level, that probably sounds monotonous, sure, maybe somewhat frustrating, but if you haven't been an addict, you have no idea what waiting truly means until you've dealt with a dealer that is in a perpetual state of being on his way right now, only for him to never arrive, which makes you realize you just wasted 13 hours sitting around anxiously by your phone, and now you're most likely gonna go to sleep with nothing. And the worst part of this, whether it be having a dealer who ruins your day, making you wait, texting you every 5 hours saying he's on his way, is while you're waiting for drugs, it's impossibly hard to distract yourself and think of anything but the incoming drugs that are potentially coming your way. You're both nervous and excited, and I can't tell you how many nights I spent sitting by that phone, waiting for it to ring. In fact, I used to know a guy who would have me waiting from sunrise to sunset, only to send a text at 2 in the morning saying, "Tomorrow." And he would do this for 3 days in a row until my spirit was so broken and defeated that I would desperately text eventually and be like, "Please stop. Either come or don't come, because I can't take it anymore." Dealers do this mainly because they lead pathetic, powerless lives in which their only source of pleasure is to power trip over you and make you miserable, which is cruel and unusual. And to be honest, the guy who frequently did this to me for years is the only one I've ever known who I would murder if murder was somehow legalized. Anyways, moving on to number 3, your entire social circle becomes undesirable losers who rip you off, who you would never hang out with if it weren't for your active addiction. This one is going to be kind of a combination of two. One of them being that you have to spend most of your time around a cacophony of people you secretly hate. And 2, you're constantly being ripped off and sold crushed up Smarties wrapped into tinfoil, which is like being a baby with candy, having that candy taken away from you, and then spun around and punched in the face. What a hopeless and enraging feeling. And then you realize you just snorted Smarties, which you haven't had for years, so it's kind of nostalgic of a taste. Blah blah blah. But you're physically shaking with rage once again, wishing murder was somehow legalized, if only for a day. One time years ago, me and a friend spent the whole day running around pawning anything we had that had value. I don't know, probably my mom's microwave. Something that reeks of desperation and permanently alters your relationship with your mom because 1, she knows you're using again, and 2, she can no longer heat up turkey pot pies. But we spent all the money on a wrapped up bag of baby laxative, and my friend, no joke, just started bawling his eyes out. Everyone knows this feeling all too well, and once again, it's all a part of the game. Number 2, you never have any money, which keeps you stuck in a perpetual state of wasting your life. I'm a millennial, and one thing I've noticed is the older crowd of addicts have a ton of war stories of how they ended up living on the streets or eating out of garbage bags. And as bad as that sounds, like I said, it seems to me that the younger addicts deal with that less, but that doesn't necessarily mean they don't still suffer. In fact, being homeless sounds adventurous to me, I know I already said that. But for me personally, I can't recall how much money and hours I wasted chasing highs, which has caused me to be stuck in a standstill in life where I achieve nothing and have barely any skills or qualifications. And I'm still facing the after effects from said poor decisions. I'm still working wage slave Mickey Mouse jobs, which means I have to wear a corny uniform that matches my hat that sadly has a McDonald's logo on it. Try putting on that hat every morning and not quietly saying to yourself, I could have been something. Anyways, can I take your order? Sadly, this should be number 1. I saw a Philip Seymour Hoffman interview recently where he mentioned that one day he realized that if he kept continuing to do heroin, then
whatever I was doing made me worry if I was going to be able to do the things I wanted to do with my life.
And I said bingo. From my experience, drug addicts always tend to be intelligent and talented people, but personal responsibility isn't their strong suit, and you waste so much money and so much time. Anyways, let's move on to number 1, which is by far the worst on the list, which is number 1, your brain becomes permanently altered to associate drug use with feeling better, which is a demonic monkey that will never stop hanging off your back, taunting and tempting you every step of the way. As the saying goes, once an addict, always an addict, and a truer statement has never been made. When I got sober for my longest stretch of time in 2016, I realized immediately that I had 10 years of doing drugs almost every day, and I had to essentially rewire my brain to be normal again. I didn't sleep for 2 months, and I had to face the demons I'd been suffocating with a pillow for most of my late teens and early 20s. And yeah, it was not fun. There's a scene in Mad Men where the whole firm gets a butt shot of some weird amphetamine-vitamin combo, and I have to skip that episode every time I watch it because my palms start sweating immediately because I really miss the manic excitement of running through a whole script of Adderall, spending my days excitedly recording music that always ended up sounding terrible when I sobered up, but in my mind, when I was high, I considered myself, naturally, the next Mozart. In fact, I'm unfortunately one of those addicts who still associates drug use with productivity. I got so much done under the influence. And doing these productive things sober will forever be a chore now, which has completely killed my motivation to do anything. Even when making these videos, which you should totally like and subscribe to, I always have that voice in the back of my mind. Hey, 9-part harmony. Think of how much better these videos would be with the sweet, sweet motivation of Perk 30s. Yeah, those voices will never go away. People tend to mock Narcotics Anonymous, but it's actually no surprise to me that joining NA is almost a cult-like system that makes you retrain your brain military style. A lot of repetition, habit breaking. It's no surprise to me that this is often the only way to kick the demon that is addiction to recreational substances. So that's it. To summarize this video, drug addiction can be casted in a wide array of different lights. Some people look back at their drug days fondly, others not so much. Do I regret anything? Sure I do. But in my opinion, I hope this video came off as relatable because we all know what these things feel like, and they're unavoidable. And it's to my belief that drug addicts and former drug addicts share these feelings collectively. And in a way, it hardens a person up. Those who never use drugs will never experience what we've experienced. Lots of good, but a lot of bad as well. Lots of sleepless nights shaking off an extended withdrawal 3 times a year, never having money, and permanently altering your brain for the worse. Thanks for watching.